In the times of our pristine origins, people's way of life was quite different from today's. They not only knew nature, they controlled it. Through the sounds of nature and the power of the light of the heavenly bodies, they had access to the database of the universe. They received information not just through their mind, but through their feelings too. The speed of their thinking was many times greater than that of people today. The early priesthood realized that absolute control over mankind was possible only if they could achieve a considerably greater speed of thinking than other people. But how to achieve this goal? One of the ancient priests once said in a secret conversation with the high priest, "We need to conceal from people the existing divine method of nutrition. We need to have them consume food that does not accelerate, but rather slows thought down. That is the main condition. The rest is a chain reaction. The degradation of thought will bring a number of factors into play, which will influence the speed of their thinking. Compared to us, everybody else will be inferior." Then the priest began telling people what kind of food they should be giving preference to. The priests needed this to maintain their brain, their spirit, their physical health, and consequently their thought, in a more efficient operational state than other people's. Thus they suggested that people plant certain kinds of growing things, but they themselves used other kinds for food more specifically. Thus began a monstrous degradation of human consciousness. Man began to know diseases of both body and soul. Over the millennia, various books were written advising people what and how to eat to be healthy. But not a single book, not a single wise man, or indeed all the scholars put together, has ever been able to fully shed light on this question. The proof may be seen in the ever-increasing numbers of diseases of the human body and soul. A whole lot of books were published advising how to treat disease. And today you have the science of medicine. They tell you it is constantly being perfected. People who are sick, of course, need doctors. But at the same time, just look at how the number of sick people is constantly increasing. So what is medical science actually perfecting? The results speak for themselves. It is perfecting disease. I can see that this conclusion sounds strange to you, but just think, why don't the whole masses of animals in natural surroundings get sick, while man, who considers himself to be the most highly developed of all creatures, is unable to cope with his own diseases? The science you call upon to treat disease has never, over the whole period of its existence, ever touched upon the ultimate cause of all disease. It has always given its attention to effect, but it is no less true under the current conditions of your world order that doctors need sick people to treat. One of the priests assigned to take care of the science of dietetics apparently figured out something and began writing it on the wall of the secret underground chamber, where no one except a few of the main priests could enter. He wrote, "One should eat just as one breathes." After writing the last letter of the last word of the sentence, or rather, just before finishing the last letter, the old priest died. He had not managed to explain the meaning of this sentence to anyone, either to his descendant successor or to any of the other priests. Priests have been trying to unravel the mystery of the phrase, "One should eat just as one breathes," over all the millennia since. They were afraid that somebody else might get wind of it and guess its secret before they did. They erased it, rubbed it off the wall of their temple. But they transmitted it orally to succeeding generations of their descendants, in the hope that it would be deciphered in the future. All to no avail. Astrologers, healers, and wise men, appointed by political rulers, worked on the question of nutrition over many thousands of years. Nobody was able to solve the puzzle. If any of the earthly rulers had known what kind of food he should take in, he could have become the supreme ruler of the earth. The speed of his thinking could have surpassed that of the priests. But all the rulers of the earth get sick and die. Their longevity is no greater than that of ordinary people, even though they may have the best healers and wise men right at hand. It seemed to be just in passing that Anastasia uttered that sentence to you, "One should eat just as one breathes." You published it in a book. You published it in the context of your experience with her and didn't give it any special thought. But for the priests living today, the publication of that sentence, the one that had been erased from the walls of their temple more than 5,000 years ago, became a cause for very great concern. Time and again they gave careful reading to the books with Anastasia's sayings and realized that not only did she know the phrase, but she had full knowledge of divine nutrition. The speed of thinking of a man possessing such knowledge would naturally be able to surpass that of all the priests taken together, and consequently be able to control all humanity, including the priests. But in order to maintain control, he would have to conceal information, while here she has gone and revealed it to everyone. This means she has freed people from the priest's influence, thereby leading them to direct communication with the thoughts of God. This was something they realized after seeing how Anastasia slipped in among her sayings information on the nourishment of Adam. In co-creation, you cited Anastasia's words about how people were nourished back at the time of their pristine origins. All around him were a multitude of fruits with a variety of tastes, berries, and edible grasses. But during those first days, Adam felt no sense of hunger. He remained satisfied with fresh air alone. One certainly cannot live on the air man breathes today. Today's air is dying and is often harmful to one's body and soul. Adam was born in a marvelous garden, and the air surrounding him did not contain a single harmful particle. Pollen had been dissolved into that air, along with drops of purest dew. Pollen? What kind of pollen? Pollen from flowers and grasses, from trees and fruit, which diffused fragrances into the air. Some came from those close by, while breezes brought others from distant places. Back then, man was not distracted from his great works by any problems of finding food. He was fed by everything around him through the air. This was the way it was all designed by the Creator right from the very beginning, so that all life on earth should strive to please man, and the air and the water and the breeze would be life-giving under the impulse of love. Of course, people's diet at the time of their divine pristine origins was not confined to life-giving air. They consumed a lot else besides, but their body and soul were nourished by air and water to a significant degree. When you published Anastasia's words about nutrition, the priests were astonished at how this simplest of truths had escaped them for so long. Yet all along they knew why this was so. Secluding themselves in their temples, they were not able to breathe the pollen-laden air. In gathering people together for rituals, where the only thing the crowds raised was dust, they ended up breathing the dust of their own schemes. Bees, after all, gather pollen from a relatively small number of floral species. But the air contains all varieties, and it is distinguished from bee-produced pollen by its softness and its easy digestibility. Airborne pollen is alive, capable of fecundation. With each breath, a man would take it in, and it dissolved inside, nourishing his whole body, including his brain. When the priest saw Anastasia talking about family domains, a hectare of one's motherland for each family, they realized she was taking people back to a way of life that was part and parcel of their pristine origins. They knew right away that family domains are not only capable of bringing people material benefits, there is something much more important. In the context of Anastasia's sayings, people can form a space capable of nourishing their body, soul, and spirit, and show to everyone openly the truths of the divine order of creation. The time is approaching when mankind will be present simultaneously in two worlds. It will be able to make use both of the achievements of the technocratic, artificial world, as well as its own divine, pristine origins. By comparing these two worlds, not through hearsay but firsthand, through observing their own experience, people will be able to make their own choice or create a new world. They will be able to create their own marvelous divine future. Anastasia showed people not only the meaning and essence of divine nutrition, but how to attain it as well. Her family domains. Picture to yourself, Vladimir, a morning time. A man awakens at dawn and goes out of his house into the garden of his family domain, in which are growing more than 300 varieties of plants he needs. He has taken up the habit of walking around his property every morning. As he walks along the path, his eyes are delighted by the lively variety of herbs, trees, and flowers. These cannot help but delight and furnish him with positive emotions. Nothing can give him a greater emotional charge or abundant energy than one's own family life-giving space. Many ages passed. In each of them, attempts were made to attract mankind to all sorts of different values. Man became enthralled with a huge house, the latest clothing, a new car, or some other gadget. Man became enthralled with money and his position in society, but all such joys are conditional and fleeting. They only bring a temporary sense of happiness and pleasure, and within a short space of time they become commonplace, bothersome, and sometimes downright annoying. An old and decaying house will begin to demand constant repair. A car, too, can start having frequent breakdowns. Clothes wear out. Man has always intuitively felt the true beauty and perfection of the eternal, and that is why even a king surrounded by luxury and personal palaces has always needed a garden. This is a truth that has remained unshakable for millions of years of man's life on earth. True delight and peace are attainable only in one's own family domain. When a man takes his morning walk through his family domain, every blade of grass is delighted and reacts to him, and far from decaying, his garden grows with every passing moment of blessed living. The man understands that the program he has set out, trees, bushes, and fruit bearers planted by his own hand, will not decay but live on through the ages. They will live forever, provided the man does not change his mind. When the man takes his morning walk through his family domain, he breathes its air, and with each breath takes in thousands of invisible particles, plant pollen. The air is saturated with them. Quite alive, they enter the man, dissolving within him without a trace, nourishing his body with everything he needs. And the air of one's family domain nourishes not only the human body, but feeds the spirit with ethers and accelerates thought. When the man takes his morning walk through his family domain, he may stop all of a sudden and pick 3 berries off a currant bush and eat them. Why does he stop in front of a currant bush in particular? Why does he pick precisely 3 berries? In what book of wisdom has the man read that on this particular day, he will need these 3 berries? And he really does need them, as it turns out. He needs them on this very day, this very minute, and in this very quantity. Then after taking another few steps, the man bends over to smell a flower. Why does he do this? Who told him of the need to take in the aromatic ether of this flower in particular? When the man takes his morning walk through his family domain, he smiles, thinking about something personal, while at the same time enjoying a surfeit of fruits, not thinking about them, but feeling them. This man has been eating just as he breathes. Who then has been calculating the man's dietetic needs with such incredible accuracy? Where has all this information been recorded for every man born on the earth? This information, you realize, Vladimir, all this information is present in every man born on the earth. Note this: every man contains a mechanism capable of arousing the sense of hunger, a signal that his body and spirit require some land of substance in the universe. We need not specify just what exactly the proportion or quantity. Nobody can answer this question intellectually. Only your body knows about this, and it is what selects just 3 currant berries out of the whole variety available. But in order to afford the opportunity for the right choice, your body must have all the information available about them. And it is only in one's family domain that such information is accessible. Let's say you go into a store where there are a whole lot of fruits spread out on the counters. You want an apple. You see a whole huge variety of apples. Which kind to choose? An exact choice is impossible, since your body, which is capable of making an exact choice, does not have any information about the apples on the counters. It hasn't tried them. It doesn't know the taste and correlation of substances. Neither does it know when the apples were picked, which is very important as well. As a result, the apples you purchase at the store may turn out to be beneficial, but their benefit will be not nearly as great as when your body is apprised of all the information about the product you are making it digest. The product you ingest may even turn out to be harmful to your body, in which case disease makes an appearance. Such a thing could not happen in your family domain, since you know for absolute certain which tree produces the sweeter or more sour apples, and when they are ready for you. Your body receives all the information about all the fruits in your family domain. There is another concept in your civilization. It's healthful for a man to consume fresh produce. But what exactly is fresh produce? Not frozen, dried, tinned, or sealed in barrels, but produce that comes to you in its natural state. And you have cultivated a huge assortment of hybrid varieties that can be preserved many days with appearance of fresh produce. Believe me, the appearance of freshness is deceptive and harmful. Almost all fruits can be considered fresh for no more than a few minutes. Cherries, both sweet and wild, and apples will last an hour tops. But still they change with every minute that goes by, mutating into something else. Pick a cherry and leave it just overnight. Then take it back to the tree where it came from and eat it. Then pick another cherry from the same branch and taste it. See, you will sense the difference. Which cherry is fresher and tastier, even with your eyes closed? Anyone who doesn't have a family domain, no matter how rich or important he may be, cannot take in fresh food. That means he is not as capable of quick thinking as he might otherwise be. Even back in ancient treatises, wise men attempted to set forth their perceptions as to what produce was the most helpful for man in any given season. And this is very important. But among all of these, there is only one treatise which remains inviolable, and that is the one which God himself prepared for each individual man. Look for yourself and see how gradually, starting in the spring, the early plants bring forth their fruits. Others appear later in the summer, at its beginning or end, while the autumn gives rise to a variety of other plants. What is there to write about here when it has been so obviously set forth what one should eat and when, and not just in broad terms of months or seasons? The choice is hinted at moment by moment. It is as though the Creator is ready to spoon-feed any man with his own hand. Just think how perfect and exact his program is. There is a particular season of the year when any given species of fruit ripens. At the same time, the planets are in a particular arrangement, and that is the most favorable season for man to take in that fruit. It was at that very moment, the most appropriate moment as indicated by God, that man decided to take in the fruit as his body suddenly felt a desire for it. There was no question of man's working all this out through calculation. Man did not make a problem out of what to ingest and when. He simply ate. He ate because he felt like eating, because it pleased him to do so. And at the same time, his thought was elated with joint co-creation. His thought danced ahead, no longer concerning itself with what had been planned in advance by the Father's hand. It desired to create even more so that everyone could rejoice in the contemplation at the sight of a new creation. And the Father exclaimed in delight, "My Son is a creator," as he fed his child with his creations. In listening to Anastasia's grandfather's account of what man should eat and how, I couldn't help comparing what he said with the dietary regimes of people today, even rich people living in so-called civilized countries. A rather puzzling situation unfolded. To begin with, we all know that it is healthful for man to consume fresh and ecologically clean produce. We all know that in nature there are plants capable of treating all types of diseases of the body. Hold on, we need to be more precise. In nature there are plants capable of preventing diseases of the body. Then why don't we have them available? Why and under whose influence have we chosen a way of life which destroys not only our bodies but our minds too? Someone out there must be simply laughing at us, befooling us into calling this way of life civilized besides. If we use terms like civilized country, civilized society, meaning by this a society of people which has achieved a certain and of course correct level of development, then this development should also be reflected in, among other things, questions pertaining to diet. And not just among other things, but first and foremost. Now let's pay a visit together to a typical food store or supermarket. We find that the majority of produce available is nicely packaged and has a long shelf life. We find a whole lot of dried, frozen, and concentrated products, which can hardly be termed fresh produce. At the supermarket, we can also find so-called fresh vegetables, beautiful to look at tomatoes, cucumbers, and so forth. But lately it has come to light that these are hybrids, specially cultivated varieties capable of preserving their good looks for a long time, but considerably inferior in quality to the normal, natural variety. Just about any adult resident of a European country is aware of this. Europe already has a chain of stores with signage proclaiming they sell only ecologically clean merchandise, but at a price about 5 times higher than in other stores. This means that the public has now recognized that other stores, and there are far more of them, sell produce that is not ecologically clean. But let us call a spade a spade. The public has recognized that a majority of their number have been consuming produce that is harmful to their health. Hold on, what about the term civilized society? Is it possible for people in a civilized society to consume food of inferior quality, which is harmful to their health? A more accurate description of such a people might be a muddle-headed society, or a society with a befuddled population. Look at what is happening. Someone consumes inferior produce and takes ill. The sick person falls into the arms of a system called healthcare. This system has at its disposal a huge quantity of drugs, hospitals, and clinics, and this has to be paid for somehow. Huge sums of money are continually being poured into it. We are told it is constantly improving. But note, according to statistics, the number of sick people is rising each year. Then along come new diseases which mankind never had to grapple with before, including a whole lot of mental illnesses, not to mention the fashionable profession of psychotherapy. And the question resounds loud and clear: what is behind the degradation of the overall health of these civilized societies? Isn't the healthcare system itself at least partly to blame? By comparing data from various sources, anyone who wishes to can determine that the overall degradation of humanity's health is an actual fact. Yes, we're talking about physical well-being, but mental health is an even more dangerous factor. Let's say a man living in his family domain wanted to eat an apple, for example. What does he do? He goes out into his orchard, picks a fresh fruit from a tree, and eats it. Then let's take a look at the actions of another man who lives in a city apartment in a developed society, who also wants to eat an apple. He takes some money, goes to the store and buys an apple, which is no longer fresh. He buys an apple which another person grew and packed in a crate. Someone else transported this apple in a truck or a plane. Then a third party built a store and placed this apple on one of the counters. All these operations, from the growing of the apple right up to the final sale, are accounted for by special people who compile inventories and collect taxes, duties, and other exorbitant charges. Thus, we have a whole chain of procedures whereby people are involved in the supposedly useful business of offering a fellow human being the opportunity to taste the fruit of an apple tree. And the one who tastes this fruit must first find work somewhere to earn the paper money and pay for this whole thought-up chain of intermediaries standing between the apple tree's branch and man. Yet our society considers this normal. A befuddled society has no inkling that someone very much wanted to lead people away from their true purpose and have their attention occupied in senseless pursuits. The process of drawing people into such absurdities has been a long one. That's not something you could do quickly. If you tried to do it quickly, even the most feeble-minded individual would be able to see the stupidity of what was happening. Just think what a paradox it all is. One fine day you decide, as usual, to go out to your apple tree and pick some fruit. You no sooner step off your front porch and start heading for the tree than you catch sight of a whole queue of people. "Who are you?" you ask the fellow standing closest to you. "I'm an apple dealer," he answers. "And who are these people behind you?" You continue to wonder and hear in reply, "Behind me is the person who trucks the apples to my store. Behind him is the one who picks them from the tree. And around each one of us you see an entourage of people in fresh, clean suits. They are the ones who record the quantity of apples that pass through our hands." "But really, what are you, chaps? Don't tell me you're a bunch of schizos," you blurt out in a fluster. "What's with all the meaningless red tape? Who's going to thank you for such nonsense as this?" And the reply comes, "You will thank us. You will pay all of us money, and with that money, we too shall buy apples." "And where am I going to get all that money to pay you?" "Go see your neighbor, the one with the pear trees. There's a job open for a record clerk. You can become a pear tree record clerk, earn money, pay us, and eat apples whenever you like." How absurd! You're thinking, no doubt, utter schizophrenia. Of course it's absurd. Of course it's schizophrenia. But this is just the kind of tiling that's going on right now with each of us in our society. The conditions for a healthy life, and really, they are all too obvious, need to be set down in the form of a treatise. Well, here's one, a miniature treatise. Point number 1. Every man living on the earth should have his own domain, his own space to guarantee for himself a supply of high-quality food. Point number 2. In his own space, man should grow, preferably by his own hand, fruit-bearing plants, plants that he considers tasty and healthful. Say, for example, someone knows ahead of time that he doesn't like red currants. He need not plant these in large quantities. Altogether, at least 300 varieties of perennials should be put in. Naturally, this is not something that can be accomplished in the space of a year, or even 2 or 3. But it is entirely possible to ensure that one's children will have, in fact, an ideal source of food supply. Point number 3. Every morning upon awakening, a man should take a walk through his family domain and, if he desires, eat some fruit or berries or herbs which have just that moment ripened to maturity. This should be done entirely according to one's desire, and not at the recommendation of some sort of dietitian, even one with a postgraduate degree. Once your body has become familiar with all the taste qualities of the food growing in your domain, it will compile the ideal regime for you in terms of quality, quantity, and the appropriate time for the food to be eaten. You don't need to go out to your garden just in the morning or according to a strict timetable somebody has thought up, but only when you have a real desire to eat. According to Anastasia's affirmation, there are no diseases of the human flesh which cannot be overcome by the space of love you have created. Of course, we're not talking about the space of a city flat, but a domain established according to the principles she has set forth. After formulating these rules on a pad of paper, I read them to Anastasia's grandfather and asked, "Have I left out anything?" If you simply want to jot down a summary, this will do to start with. Only you really must say something about the neighbors. What have neighbors got to do with it? I didn't understand at first. What do you mean, what have they got to do with it? Grandfather was taken aback by my query. Think about it. If just on the other side of the fence from your domain, there's a factory spewing forth deadly fumes, and the wind carries these fumes into the space of your domain, what kind of air are you going to be breathing? Nobody would build their domain next to a factory, I protested, but said no more. Then I remembered, in the city of Novosibirsk, there are dacha plots located barely half a kilometer from a tin smelter. And in Germany, there are farmers' fields right next to an autobahn with 8 lanes of traffic. And I thought, wow, such a simple concept as growing agricultural produce for food is possible only in places that are ecologically clean, preferably not anywhere close to big cities. There's no way a simple concept like this was going to get through to man. So I've really got to add one more point. Point number 4. Your domain should be located in an ecologically clean zone. It should be surrounded by the domains of those who share your vision of creating family oases of paradise. One breeze will carry life-giving pollen from your domain to your neighbors, while another breeze from their direction will bring you life-giving air. Excerpt from Vladimir Megre, Energy of Life, Book 7,